Hello and welcome to another FAQ episode of the BuildASoil YouTube series. We're on season 4 in the 10x10, and this is our FAQ number 6, the beginning of the stretch of flower. And there's not a lot to document other than the plants are growing in size. So we're going to record another episode, and you'll be seeing that coming out soon. But I also wanted to do the FAQ. The building's basically empty. We have everybody in the company over at the shipping building, making sure that all hands are on deck to catch up after a very busy Black Friday. But we really want to make sure they go out as fast as possible. So I've got a tripod up and I've got my FAQ questions printed out, which I didn't even look at. Dean sent them over. I hit the print button, flipped it upside down, and I'm going to turn this over and get started right now as per usual. If you've got questions, go ahead and drop them in here. I was reading some of the questions after the last FAQ and I was laughing. I think it's going to be fun to take some of the answers and go further with an FAQ of the FAQ. So maybe we'll try that soon. But I saw some of the things I'd like to respond to on video, and I think that would be fun as well. Maybe I'll do a couple of shorts related to the FAQ. That way I don't have to record a whole episode. So thank you for participating. Let's flip it over. Let's get started. Signalman says, as a master gardener, I was taught to break up the root ball. You didn't break up the root ball. Why? When it comes to breaking up the root ball, I believe a lot of times they're doing it because they're trying to open up that root space and make sure that it's not root bound. I avoid that by not getting root-bound plants, and I don't need to rip them up. I think that they have the right amount of roots, and I've never had a problem from doing this. There's many different reasons that I'll do things, but if I've noticed in my life that if there's something I can skip and not have any bad results from, I feel more efficient, and so that's part of the reason why I don't do it. The other reason really is I just don't think it makes any sense to rip on the plant's root system, which doesn't really occur in nature, and do that as part of the transplant process. Now, if it's root bound and being fed nutrients in a small cup, I can kind of see that maybe put into a new medium that wouldn't be best used and might cause some death of roots and things. But in the living soil system, following the BuildASoil way, when you're transplanting on time, I don't think that it's part of the requirement at all. And personally, it's just the way that I do it. And a lot of the BuildASoil way is just stuff that I've come to do and as commonplace practice. But I will say I have friends that break up the root ball. When I see them do it, I'm just like, I can't imagine doing that to my plants. And I've seen some of them, do really well right after that. So I'm not saying it doesn't work, it's just not my style. Good question, by the way. Martin says, would you have to wash your hands when you handle your males with pollen before you touch any of your females? Yeah, it'd be good practice. I just don't want to cause accidental contamination. And it's one of those things where you hear pollen can travel a pretty great distance when it's blowing off the plant. But when I open up that tent door, I don't want it to cause a rift of pollen flying at me. So we have very little air movement, and I'm hoping to keep the humidity up in there at least enough where it's not just static flying at me the second I open it. And I'm going to take some basic principles. I'm not going to go in there and check on it all the time. I'll use the window, especially when pollen starts flying. I've got it all closed right now. But as far as if I were to open the tent and then want to go check in the other one, I'm going to wash my hands, probably have my jacket, just take it off. For the most part, I've done it before and I never had a problem with opening the tent versus the other, but I don't want to risk it. And so I will definitely mitigate that risk. I think even just water would kind of neutralize the pollen, but soap and water, real quick, make sure that if I do go in there, I'm not spreading the pollen. So basically I'm just going to be careful. And I think you should too if you're doing the same thing. Brandon says, does no-till organic growing always certainly mean bugs? That's my biggest issue with growing organic indoors. I don't want bugs in my house. I found that cocoa and bottled nutrients result in a clean overall environment and I never get pests. So the word pests, no, that does not have to be the case in living soil. In fact, you should never have any because you do have bugs, and absolutely it's a requirement. What I mean by that is right now in every house, there's probably a house fly and there's probably a few things going around. And that's just because you open your doors, you might have some house plants, and it should never get that bad. You should never have a problem in your house because you have a living soil grow. But when you go inside the living soil grow, inside the soil, there should be predator mites and rove beetles and worms and all these things contained in that ecosystem. But that ecosystem should be good enough where they never want to leave, and it's not like you're gonna have all these worms crawling around. At worst case, they die inside the tent. Of course, if you have bright lights and you attract gnats or you have flies, it could be in the same bedroom a problem. And so you want to be really diligent with that. Living soil really does mean that full ecosystem, and it's not for everyone. So if cocoa and kind of like that white lab coat and getting everything sterilized clean, if that's the idea that's most attractive to you, I think you should stick with it. But a lot of us, I feel vision pigs and chickens and overalls and hay and just the whole permaculture farm. And that's what we're trying to mimic. And so it's certainly a part of the process. I will say though, using an earth box, covering it there's ways to make this super clean. I mean, 10 years of back-to-back rows, nonstop documented from Instagram and now on YouTube, and we've not had an issue. But I think the challenge with saying bugs and pests is that, you know, some of the bugs in our system, we want them there, but they're not anywhere else in the environment here. There's no rove beetles like on my table. There's no worms out here. The little predator mites, they stay in there. So hope that answers your question. I don't want anybody to be scared away from it, but I don't want to be disingenuous and say like, there's not going to be crawly things in your soil. Stone Wolf, question, why the coconut water powder? Cheers. Good question. The story behind the scenes. In the Living Organic Soil Forum on IC Mag and how I got introduced to Clackamas coot and some of the other characters that you'll see talking about living soil. And you know, many of them are still around, and I'm sure there was thousands of people that were affected by that. And there's lots of conversations about which ingredients to use. And it became kind of ubiquitous through the scene that people that were into this would translate what they were putting into their body and consider it for giving to the soil. And so Clackamas coot, he started the sprouted seed teas, and he's basically famous for creating that whole enzyme component of feeding your plants and then simplifying it down to these sprouted seeds that really get a really big boost from the enzymes to the soil. And the other things that we were discussing were a lot of the organic hacks, and a lot of them are lowering the energy required to do the job, basically being more efficient in a natural way. And so if you look at seaweed, there's growth hormones in seaweed that unlock a lot of potential, replace rooting hormones, and we were looking for some of the same growth factor, growth hormones, as well as just nutritional components in other health tonics, and coconut water is one of the super ones. It was mentioned that they are basically a large seed, like a drupe. Probably get the terminology wrong, but if you think of a seed being the essence of life and like the coconut being a huge one and it having all of this enzymatic, just beautiful liquid inside that's going to be the beginning stage of life. If we could tap into that, we're kind of stealing that. And the same thing with the sprouted seed teas. So a coconut water powder is like a huge sprouted seed tea. And the young coconut that we use we only get it from the young green coconut, so it's not fully mature. Once it matures, that young coconut water turns into the wall and the milk, and it's already been utilized by the coconut itself. And so we take the coconut water, that's the health tonic that you hear a lot of people talking about drinking for like a sports drink or just for health purposes. And when we give it to the plants, the idea is to get the very best one possible. And so at the grocery store, you can buy some that are like, I think it's Harmless Harvest. They're like purple sometimes. They're really good, but it was so expensive to water the plants with that it was kind of ridiculous. So we started looking for the freeze-dried version. And when you go to the grocery store, they have salts and other things because it's for human, for like electrolytes. And so getting a single ingredient was hard. And then we found products that had like a maltodextrin powder in it so that it would stay in powder form. And that was the best freeze-dried that we found for a while. And then years back, we found a producer that makes a single ingredient. They've got a better freeze-drying process where they do not have to use the starch powder. So you get more coconut water in the bag, and it's as close as we can get to the stuff in the refrigerator or literally directly from the tree. And if you live in an area where you can see the young green coconuts and you can harvest them fresh and use it, that would be the absolute best way to go. Not only is there potassium and sugars and other nutrients that the plants like, the microbial life also enjoy, but we're hoping that there's more to it. There's a lot of plants like the aloe vera plant, the coconut plant, that have been medicinally used for thousands of years, hundreds of years, for a long time. And those are the ones that attract us as far as the BuildASoil way, because they have such a track record with human history. The neem cake, neem oil, a lot of ones that go back thousands of years and have been used in natural gardening. And we should probably talk about those. There's a lot of misinformation on neem. Coot taught me a lot about that. So to round out this question, because I'm just rambling now, that's why coconut water. Learning about all its health properties, the sugars and the microbial food from the enzymes, tapping into that, seeing really good results like instant turgor in the plants, then realizing the expense of it, then finding the freeze-dried. Let's just make this a real product with the single ingredient instead of making it hard to get like at the grocery store. So I hope that answers the question, and I hope you benefit from it. Jimmy says, how many times per run do you use the Big 6? Would once a week at the lowest dose be too much? Would it make sense to do during beginning and mid flower? Thanks. Really good question. So I've got the official BuildASoil.com schedule here. If you go to the website, and it's educational growing system, scroll to the very bottom, you can print this out. On here, if you go to Big 6, this is all once per week. So it's labeled by week 1, week 2, and then the weeks that are going. So every time you see this, it's one time per week. In veg, we use it once per week, in pre-bloom, and then I basically cut it out at the end of ripening. And part of the idea there is that If people are in smaller containers, I do want them using the micronutrients once a week at the lowest amount, and I don't think you're gonna have any issues. We're talking low amounts, and I've done that many times and have really great success. And when people are asking for a schedule, I think that going to once every 2 weeks in a smaller container might be a challenge. However, a big part of the BuildASoil way is to go the less is more approach. And I find myself doing it once every couple of weeks in larger beds. And I make sure that I at least get it initially in there, and then I wanna make sure if I'm going to ignore using things consistently, I at least hit it during the times that they're most likely to need everything. And to me, that's the transition period. So when I'm going into pre-bloom and I'm stacking and I want to do like a top dress because I'm going to flip to flower, that would be the time that I start using the big 6 if I hadn't been, and make sure that when they go hard and they flip the transition, they've got everything they need, including the micronutrients. Also, from what I've noticed, the amount that we're telling you to apply versus how much we actually can mix in the potting soil, based on the soil testing numbers, we're using very small amounts. And so I think just having it in solution once a week when you water the plants gives them access to it, but it's not gonna cause a buildup using it at the recommended dosage even once a week. So hopefully that helps you feel more comfortable with using it. And then using my scale, if you're in a big bed and you're not having any issues, use it at the key times. If you're in a smaller container, it becomes more important as it becomes closer to hydro when you're smaller to make sure that we're using things a little bit more often to offset that. So thanks for the question. Let's see, let me take a sip. All right, old man says, isn't the environment outside the tent just as important for any real control in the grow tent? What are the temp humidity deltas at the store versus inside the tent, Jeremy? Good question. Yes, very important. Some would call it the lung room, right? And so we're in a big warehouse here, which makes things really easy and nice. It's very well insulated. If I were to show you around, it's all spray insulated in here. We do have a heater that's above this tent, and it fires this direction, and it just generally warms it in here. But we don't keep it that warm. It's about 68 degrees on the thermostat. In the summer, it does get warmer, but in the winter, it's usually about 68 to 70 degrees in here. The caveat is we have a garage door that's in the back that we use to open to receive material or take a pallet in and out. And when that happens, the air intake on the back of the tent there will take in slightly colder air for a small duration. It's never too hot in here, causing my grow lights to be a concern. So 68 to 75 in the winter. In the summer, it does get hot. It can be, we don't have a really good air conditioning system. So we'll run a swamp cooler, which can affect humidity. And so every single one of you is going to have a different issue when it comes to what your surrounding environment is. If you're in a bedroom, it may be that you're keeping your house really comfortable for your family, but that might be slightly too warm for running the grow lights in such a small space. Nice thing is there's normally a window and you can tap into cooler, fresh air, albeit in summer, it might need to be air conditioned. No matter what, we're trying to control what's inside the tent. And absolutely what's going on outside the tent is going to be a factor in that you're going to have to deal with. So everyone's going to have their own weakest link, things they have to deal with. And I know that if you have the ultimate control, you could absolutely control the lung room environment separate from the full environment so that when you're exchanging air, it's not really such a problem on humidity. Then you can humidify the air out here, bring it in. There's just levels to it, right? But I feel like for the home grower, most of us are dealing with like a garage, a bedroom, something like that, where it's more about the small difference inside the tent. And everyone, like if you live in a really hot area or a really humid area, you're gonna have slightly different things to consider. So don't take what I do as the exact way. All right, vegan plant power. What product would you recommend to manage spider mites? Not my cash crop, but my spinach is covered in it. I'm afraid it will spread being in the same tent. Yeah, definitely. So you should look at it, right? If they are soil mites and they just happen to be running around the spinach, because it's low and it's right there in the soil surface, it may not be an issue at all. They might just be soil mites. But if they are spider mites and they're actually eating your spinach leaf, then it would be likely that there could be some carryover. Not all pests are gonna eat the same host plant, like they might be liking that better and may never go over, but like you, I would want to be free of spider mites if possible. So one of the methods with the BuildASoil way when it comes to pest control is to leverage 2 to 3 organic products that you like and keep them in stock. That could be homemade ones, that could be purchased ones, but as far as I'm concerned, I don't want them to be poisons or anything bad whatsoever. I want to be something that I feel really comfortable using, and I recommend 2 to 3 because the organic way is to use things in rotations so that we get a better effect on them. There's certain products that are good, but not good later in flower. And there's certain products that are safe even late in flower. And so having a few different ones allows you to make choices depending on where you're at. But if you're in veg and you've got spider mites, there's a few things you could do. Spinosad, Captain Jack's is kind of the organic nuclear bomb. It's not really approved on the cannabis list for medicinal facilities because a lot of times they're abusing the product, they're spraying it for caterpillars, they're putting it on flowers. Using it, I think under normal purposes, it's a great product. And so in veg, I'd be very comfortable with that. I would recommend our integrated pest management report at BuildASoil.com. We have a free report, it's like the Adam Dunn Show report we did years back. You can even listen to that episode. And we still recommend a lot of those things. You can make your own homemade version with essential oils, an emulsifier, neem oil. All these things work really well. A neem oil and Agsil 16H works really well against spider mites, makes them very inhospitable for them on the leaf, and it will kill them and stop them from laying eggs and all sorts of other benefits. Otherwise, my go-to personally, lately, the last couple of years, is the EM5 that we offer, the Dr. Zymes. The other one that we've been using on the greenhouse a lot is the Jadam wetting agent. Growing Organic makes a version. We did a video on how to make your own. For whatever reason, that really does help suffocate them, and just that alone. But you could use that as a base wetting agent to up the ante if you're not seeing results. EM5, it has organic apple cider vinegar, it has organic grape alcohol, it has essential oils. And so it very closely mimics what a home grower might do to make something from scratch. And then what we do is we try and rotate it. And so a spider mite, it's gonna have a certain life cycle and you can learn about it. But typically we're trying to hit a 3-day window where if I'm gonna spray today, I absolutely wanna spray again within 3 days so that I don't have new eggs hatch and a new life cycle start. I wanna keep them down. And so if it was me, what we typically do, what my friends do, if I've ever seen a problem, is we immediately break out something, the big guns. Go defoliate, go clean, go just completely get in your room and make sure that it's spotless and do everything you can to clean and not have any hidden nooks and crannies of problems. Defoliated and cleaned up and everything's as good as you can get and really get good coverage. Bottom of the leaves, top of the soil, soil stock, everything, all the containers, the walls, and then the next day go in there again and do it again. The day after that, do it again, and then back off to an every 3-day cycle, and then back off to a once a week cycle, and then back off as you get deep in flower. Worst case, there's certain products like the Zymes and EM5 that are safe in flower, but I prefer never to have to use something if I don't. So hopefully that helps answer your question. To be straightforward, 2 to 3 organic products that you trust, hit them really hard for 3 days straight, then back off to every 3 days, and make sure you're also defoliating and cleaning. After that, I think you'll be really good. But a lot of times in organics, we're not looking to use poisons that completely eradicate. And so it's gonna be about proper maintenance and about not getting them back in the grow room again. These might just be some soil mites and you're gonna be fine. So make sure to verify before you go putting a lot of extra effort into something that may not be of concern. Devin, I got the take and bake. I've got everything mixed and my Kashi blend is working. Hopefully that means it's working, laugh out loud. I was curious, how long do I leave it like that? Should I add the mulch layer next? You know, it's totally up to you. You can basically use that soil right away. But what I've noticed from most people that have purchased it is they say it does get a little bit warm depending on the moisture level and all those things. And so it would be best to let it sit in an ideal world for 7 to 14 days. And during that time period, you probably remix it 2 to 3 times just to get the outside to the inside and process through, because most of the heat and biological activity comes from the volume, and that's gonna be in the center mass of it. That's why we gave you one big pot to mix it all together. But then you can take the outsides and kind of swirl it together and mix it, and that should fully finish the process. It's finished cooking. And then you can just use it. At that point, I put it into whatever container I want and put the mulch in. If you're gonna plant right into there, you can basically just write it out. You know, 2 weeks is plenty, and you can plant right into it. I would say you could probably plant into it day 1. It's not gonna get super hot, but ideally you'd wait at least 1 week. And if you had extra time, you could do that 10 to 14 day wait and just really make sure. Good question. To the people that actually get their questions on here, I really appreciate it, because you're not only getting a question just for you, it's helping hundreds, if not thousands of other people that probably have the same question, and they may not just be as comfortable asking it. So thanks for everything. Until the next one, I'll see you guys on the next BuildASoil episode.